Welcome to Deep Thought. Look at your life holistically. You know what? I'm gonna tell you what. People, most people want to change the circumstances in their lives, right? And and just to be clear, I'm talking about this because once again, even though I've approached this subject before, I've seen, usually when I talk about something, even if I repeat something I might have talked about even a week ago, it's because I've seen something that happened that reiterated the point or even gave me a new perspective. Now, I'm talking about looking at your life holistically. Most people want to change their lives. Most people want to change their lives. Most people, they either want to be in a relationship or want a better relationship or change how their relationship is going with a person. Most people want more money. Even billionaires want more money. It's hard to find somebody who doesn't want more money. Even some people who tell themselves that they're all right living a simple life. It's a lot easier to live a simple life if you got money. You don't have to buy stuff with it, but if you have that option, it's better, right? In order to really make a change in your life, you can't just look at one aspect and change it and think that's going to, everything else is going to change. You really have to change it holistically. Now, I've done a Sunday podcast on how one moment can change your life. But see, that moment has to expand to every aspect of your life. If you really want to change, I'm going to tell you what. And it's hard, and this is why it's hard for people to change. If you want a better life, you might have to leave some friends behind. If you want a better life, you might have to move. If you want a better life, you're going to have to come out your comfort zone and maybe deal with some people that at one point in your life you might not wanted to deal with. Now, let me be clear with that. I don't mean you're dealing with some negative people. But like say if you're, say you live in a poor environment and you want to change stuff, it's probably not going to happen if you continue to hang out with the same people and have the same thought processes. You're going to have to change them. You might have to find a way to hang out around people who are doing better. And it's tough because sometimes people who do better are snobbish, but you might have to change that. You might have to change that. I'll use myself as an example when we speak of snobbish. I don't talk about my background a lot, and I definitely don't really get deep into my advanced degree. But anybody who's tried to dox me or anything like that, I think the reason why nobody has like quote unquote exposed Rom because it would just make me look better. But of course some people will say, well, why are you doing this when you could be doing that? Well, that's because instead of making a decision to go up, so to speak, or live a certain style, which would have been way more upscale, I decided I wanted more simplicity. I didn't want to get into a point where I'm just trying to maintain a lifestyle, which would have been with like this particular lifestyle. I'll just say it would have been very bougie, and it would have been very much about trying to impress people who didn't care a thing about me. That's the one thing about it. And anybody who's dealt with more upscale, like maybe upper middle class or anything, would know what I'm talking about. Because a lot of it is trying to impress that next person, particularly in the African American upper middle class. Right? It's more about, well, how can I one up this person? Right? Or, I got to behave this way because this is what is expected. I need to have my hair cut this way because it is what is expected. I got to drive this type of car because it's what it is expected. Now, I definitely wanted to make money. Let's be clear, but that's more to control it. But I didn't want to be in an environment where I was dealing with that. Now, if I had married somebody in that environment, I might, especially have kids, might have been stuck there. And then if I wanted to change something, it would have been more difficult because say I married somebody who's a part of that culture. they would be like, "Oh no, we ain't giving up this mini mansion. Oh no, you can't touch my Mercedes. What are you talking about? Shoot, get back to working those 70 hours a week. Get back to it." So, you had to look at the whole thing holistically. You might have, honestly, you might have to think about your religion. You got to look at every aspect. You got to look at, if you want to change something about your life, you have to look at you got to look at your spiritual practices, because that's a part of where you're at. You're going to have some serious questions, life and death questions. And when I say that, one of the things about spirituality or religion, other than modifying your behavior, is what happens after we die. Now, different people have different thoughts on it. Some people say, hey, once we die, we dead. There's spiritual paths that, believe in reincarnation. But whatever the case, if you're trying to change whatever, you're going to have to look at your religion. You might have to change how you eat. A lot of people's lifestyle is based on how they eat. I remember I talked with a gentleman who owned the Everlasting Life restaurant in the D.C. area. I'm not sure. I think it's still there. I know he owns another one. But he was telling me about a gentleman who would come in and had been spending nearly $3,000 a month on medicine. $3,000 a month. But what they did was, to get him off of that medicine, they just changed his eating habits. So he had to change what he was doing. Because, and that's the thing, you do have to think about food. A lot of people's lifestyle issues have to do with the food they eat. A lot of this food isn't good for us, and especially the more genetically modified that it is. So, you got to look at your religion, you got to look at how you're eating. You have to look at what you're doing for a living. Like, I looked at what I was doing for a living, and I was like, I don't want to keep doing this. Because a lot of people can't figure out where the stress is coming from, but then they've gotten so used to dealing with maybe office politics, or they got so used to spending the money that they're making, they don't even look at it. But they might have to change that. Like, you have to look at everything. You have to look at where you live in. Sometimes it's the area you live in. Like, some little known metaphysics, different areas, even different cities have different energies. And sometimes, to really be who you're going to be, you might have to move into a different type of energy. Right? You got to look at it. You got to look at the neighborhood, the people around you, because that affects you. Right? You got to look at every single thing. What you do for fun, you might have to look at, definitely look at the relationships. When men and women have trouble, like when men have trouble finding a woman, or they keep finding the same type of woman, my advice is you got to change it. You got to change the tribe. You might have to move around or something. Same thing with women. They might not be the ones you have to deal with. You got to find a way to deal with a different type of person. All right? And really, in order to make that happen, you got to change some other stuff. Because sometimes even the foods that we eat might predispose us to deal with certain type of folks. Like, if you're dealing with some folks and some people, and they like going to cookouts and, going to clubs, drinking all the time, that makes a big difference. That makes a big difference. So you have to change it. You got to basically, like, if you're in a negative place, you have to change all the factors that contributed to it. And it's never just one thing. That's why a lot of people, they can't change it. Like, I give you a great example, weight loss. Weight loss, that's a holistic thing. People think if they just kill calories and maybe exercise, that's it. But then they have to ask themselves, what was it that put the weight on to begin with? And it's always something emotional. It's always something emotional. Once you deal with it, that's when weight will come off. Guarantee it. If you don't deal with it first, that's why diets don't work for a lot of people, because they just think it's just they do that one thing, but then they still in that stressful relationship, or they still in that stressful environment. They still with those stressful friends that cause them to put on weight to begin with. And as long as they stay there, they might lose a few pounds at first, but if they constantly exposed to the factors that brought them to that point, they're not. That's why a lot of folks, they'll lose some weight, then put it right back on. because they didn't look at it holistically. All right. And it's a lot to it, you know, jobs, whatever. Not succeeding in life. Okay, well, they got to change something. You always got to change it. It can't just be one little thing. You got to change all the way around. All the way around. So, anyway, that's all I have for today. As always, just think on it. Peace and blessings.